Okay, so let's get started. Again, I want to welcome everybody today. Thank you for taking the time to log on. We are asking for attendance purposes that everybody use the chat box at the bottom of their screen to sign in with their name and their organization. My name is Samantha Barnaby. I am the Senior Planning Associate on the planning team at CARES of NY. Today, I will provide a brief overview of the fiscal year 21 Continuum of Care Notice of Funding Opportunity, or NOFO, New Project Opportunities. This webinar training was developed specifically for COC membership, board members, and community stakeholders who may be interested in applying for available new COC funds this year. Couple housekeeping items. Before we begin, I ask that attendees keep themselves muted through the presentation as we have allotted time for Q&A at the end. As we are going through the presentation, please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. Please be sure you have selected to send the question to everyone and not specific individuals when doing so. CARES staff will be discussing all submitted questions during the Q&A following the presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the CARES website under the NOFO page in the coming days. An FAQ document on new project opportunities will also be posted to our website. CARES developed this webinar because we believe it is our responsibility as collaborative applicant to provide clear and concise information on the COC NOFO to the full community to ensure the COC process is community-centered and transparent. Next slide, please. Today's presentation provides a summary of new project opportunities available in the fiscal year 21 COC NOFO. Specifically, the presentation will briefly review what a continuum of care is and the COC application. We will summarize COC bonus and reallocated funding opportunities and summarize DV bonus opportunities. For each new funding opportunities, we will review who is eligible to apply, what project types are eligible, and how HUD will score new project applications. We will also review expansion grants, steps for submission and deadlines, and answer any questions during the Q&A portion. Next slide, please. So let's get started. What is a continuum of care? Before detailing what can be applied for this year, it is important to have a clear understanding of the continuum of care program and its goals. The Continuum of Care, or COC program, is a funding stream out of HUD designed to promote a community-wide commitment to the goal of ending homelessness. The program provides funding to nonprofits, states, and local governments, and new this year to tribes and tribally designated housing entities to quickly rehouse homeless households while minimizing trauma and dislocation caused by homelessness. To that end, the COC program mostly funds housing assistance and support services for the most vulnerable persons experiencing homelessness, with the goal of providing housing and services for those persons who would struggle to remain successfully housed without ongoing case management. On the local level, the COC is the body of stakeholders who work collaboratively to implement the COC program and effectively and efficiently solve homelessness. It is this group of stakeholders, the COC, who submit the COC application on an annual basis. Next slide, please. The COC consolidated application is all within HUD's electronic system, eSNAPS. The collaborative applicant is responsible for submitting the application. The COC application is one part of the consolidated application. It contains information about the COC planning body, governance, overall performance, and the strategic planning process. HUD scores the COC application to determine the order of funding by COCs nationwide. The priority listing is the second piece of the consolidated application and contains project applications completed by grantees and then placed in rank order using the local COC rank and review process. It is within the priority listing that new and DV bonus applications will be submitted. Next slide, please. COC program project applications fall into two general categories: renewal applications and new project applications. As their names suggest, renewal applications are submitted annually by agencies currently receiving COC funding to support existing projects, most of which provide housing to persons who have experienced homelessness. New project applications purpose to use COC bonus reallocation or DV bonus funding to provide additional units, services, etc. Next slide, please. Forms and funding. New project applications are funded through COC bonus reallocation and DV bonus funds. New project applications may be submitted as a new project, an expansion grant, or a transition grant. I will go into more detail about these funding sources and project forms as we continue this presentation. Next slide, please. How much funding is available? For COC bonus projects, HUD allows COCs to apply for up to 5% of the COC's final pro rata need, which is a calculation of the total amount of funds the COC receives. Reallocation funding becomes available when a COC opts to shift funds from an existing eligible renewal project to create one or more new projects. DV bonus projects. HUD has appropriated $102 million for DV bonus projects this year. Each COC has been provided a designated amount. We will go over your COC amounts in a few moments. Next slide, please. Reallocation funding. Reallocation is a process COCs use to shift funds in whole or in part from existing eligible renewal projects to create one or more new projects without decreasing the COC's annual renewal demand. Reallocation may be considered if a project is underperforming or regularly returning money to HUD that could otherwise be utilized in the community by another project. Likewise, a project just may no longer be meeting a current community need. If reallocation funds become available for the membership, we will reach out via email. Next slide, please. Rank and review and eSNAPs. New and DV projects are submitted in a two-part process. First, applicants must fill out and submit the new or DV project application and submit them for scoring. Each COC has a review team that was selected to score applications. Scoring results will determine which projects will be submitted within the COC's consolidated application. This is called the rank and review process and is HUD mandated as a part of the COC application. The intention of this process is to prioritize projects for funding based on the most significant local need and performance capabilities. Secondly, Applicants will submit their projects into a HUD system known as eSNAPS. And that actually will be done by CARES because you are all UFA COCs. So CARES will submit projects on behalf of the applicants. We will review next steps for each of these applications at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So this slide shows new funding that is available in each COC for COC bonus and DV bonus projects this year. These are also available per your respective COCs on the NOFO page of the CARES website under COC public postings. Next slide, please. So who is eligible to apply for a new project? Any nonprofit organization, state, Indian tribe, or tribally designated housing entity or local government are eligible to apply for COC bonus, reallocation, and DV funding. Applicants do not need to currently receive COC funding in order to be eligible. Project applications must meet the eligibility threshold requirements outlined in the fiscal year 21 COC program NOFO. We'll discuss this more later in the presentation. Next slide, please. COC bonus and reallocated funding. What projects are eligible? Please note the next few slides are specific to COC bonus or reallocation funds. We will review DV project eligibility separately. Projects that are eligible this year for COC bonus or reallocation funding are: 1, permanent supportive housing that is either dedicated plus or has 100% of beds dedicated to persons experiencing chronic homelessness. Permanent supportive housing is permanent housing with indefinite leasing or rental assistance paired with supportive services to assist homeless persons with a disability or families with an adult or child member with a disability achieve housing stability. All dedicated plus projects have to serve at least in part households with children. A dedicated plus project targets serving people who are slightly less vulnerable than those defined as chronically homeless. For a more specific definition, please see the NOFO. As a reminder, if your COC can show there are currently no chronic homeless persons in the community, as shown through the coordinated entry list, beds dedicated to those who are chronically homeless can be opened up to other homeless populations. Second, rapid rehousing projects serving persons who qualify as homeless under paragraphs 1, 2, or 4 of the interim rule 24 CFR 578.3. Rapid rehousing connects persons experiencing homelessness to permanent housing in the community through rental assistance and a tailored package of support services. Rapid rehousing emphasizes housing search and relocation services and short and medium-term rental assistance to move homeless persons and families with or without a disability as rapidly as possible into permanent housing. For category 1, these are folks who are unsheltered, so residing in a location not meant for human habitation, like under a bridge or in their car. Or sheltered, which can include emergency shelters or hotels paid by DSS, as well as those exiting an institution where they resided for less than 90 days and were homeless at entry. Category 2 includes those at imminent risk of losing their residence, so within 14 days. In category 4, covers those fleeing domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, etc. Third, joint transitional housing, rapid rehousing projects serving persons who qualify as homeless under paragraphs 1, 2, or 4 of the interim rule. Joint component projects combine transitional housing and rapid rehousing into a single project. The goal of a joint transitional housing rapid rehousing project is to provide a safe space for people to stay, the transitional housing component, while providing financial assistance and wraparound support services to help people move into and stabilize in permanent housing. And that's the rapid rehousing portion. Fourth, HMIS. This funds the data management system required by HUD to collect the characteristics and service needs of people experiencing homelessness, as well as associated staffing. And finally, 5, support services only, coordinated entry project. This funds coordination of the coordinated entry system, a required part of COC infrastructure that establishes a community-wide referral or priority list of households for COC-funded housing, prioritizing the most vulnerable. As a note, any youth serving provider may serve unaccompanied youth aged 24 and under who have an unsafe primary nighttime residence and no safe alternatives to that residence. That also applies to families headed by youth aged 24 and under. Next slide, please. What is required of funded projects? All new projects are required to enter into the HMIS system. DV projects must enter into a system that is comparable to HMIS. All new projects must participate in the COC's coordinated entry system. All new projects must follow a Housing First model. Housing First prioritizes rapid placement and stability in permanent housing without service requirements or preconditions to admission. All new project applicants must match all requested grant funds except for leasing funds with no less than 25% of funds or in-kind contributions from other sources. HUD will allow new projects to request 1 year of funding with a longer initial grant term not to exceed 18 months to allow for the additional time required to start a program. HUD strongly encourages all rental assistance to begin within 12 months of award. Next slide, please. Project quality threshold. All new projects must meet a specific quality threshold before HUD will consider the project for funding. Specifically, project applicants and subrecipients must demonstrate the financial and management capacity and experience to carry out the project and the capacity to administer federal funds. This includes satisfactory capacity, drawdowns, and performance for existing grants funded through the Shelter Plus Care or COC programs. Project applicants must demonstrate that they will be able to meet all timeline standards per the interim rule, which includes things like approving activities and projects promptly, distributing funds to subrecipients within 45 days, and drawing down funds at least once a quarter. Next slide, please. HUD review. New project application responses should demonstrate that the type of housing proposed fits the needs of program participants. The type of supportive services offered ensures successful retention or rapid placement in permanent housing and are provided in a way that fits participants' needs. The proposed project has a specific plan to coordinate and integrate with other mainstream health, social services, and employment programs, and that participants are assisted in obtaining benefits for which they may be eligible. The proposed project provides enough rapid rehousing assistance to ensure participants may move from transitional to permanent housing. Coordinated entry and HMIS project quality thresholds can be found on page 47 and 48 of the NOFA. Next slide, please. Funding criteria for COC. Apart from project quality, the NOFO does not clearly outline the process by which HUD selects bonus projects for funding. We do know, however, how HUD determines funding for projects placed in Tier 2, and that all bonus projects are placed in Tier 2 in order to ensure an existing project that currently houses persons is not displaced by a new project. Tier 2 projects are scored on a 100-point scale. 50 points directly related to the COC score. 40 points directly related to the project ranking, and 10 points for the commitment to follow a housing first approach. Housing First is a model of housing assistance that prioritizes rapid placement and stabilization in permanent housing that does not have service participation requirements or preconditions, such as sobriety or a minimum income threshold. Transitional housing and supportive services only projects are considered using a Housing First model for the purposes of this NOFO if they operate with low barriers, work to quickly move people into permanent housing, do not require participation in supportive services, and for transitional housing projects, do not require preconditions for moving into the transitional housing. Next slide, please. Now let's discuss DV bonus funding. Again, this year, HUD has established a pool of funds for DV bonus projects. These projects are intended to assist survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. What projects are eligible? Projects that are eligible this year for DV bonus funding are rapid rehousing, projects that demonstrate trauma-informed, victim-centered approaches, and you have to apply for a minimum of $50,000. Joint transitional and permanent housing rapid rehousing component projects that demonstrate trauma-informed, victim-centered approaches. Again, you have to apply for $50,000, and this type combines 2 single projects into one. And then support services only project for coordinated entry to implement policies, procedures, and practices that equip the COC's coordinated entry to better meet the needs of survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. This type project must implement policies, procedures, and practices that equip the COC's coordinated entry to better meet the needs of people experiencing homelessness who are survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. Next slide, please. Project quality thresholds for DV. As seen on slide 15, the project quality thresholds for DV projects are the same. Next slide, please. Funding criteria for DV housing programs. HUD utilizes the following criteria to review DV housing projects that are placed in Tier 2. Up to 50 points in direct proportion to the COC, to the score received on the COC application. Up to 25 points based on the extent the COC is able to quantify the need for the project in its portfolio, extent of the need and how the project will fill the gap. And up to 25 points based on the previous performance of the applicant in serving survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. If a COC applies for the DV bonus, HUD will award a point value to each project application. Additionally, points will be a combination of the COC application score and the response provided in the DV bonus specific questions in the COC consolidated application. Project scores will be based on a 100-point scale. Next slide. Funding criteria for DVCE programs. 50 points in direct proportion to the score received on the COC application, and up to 50 points based on the extent the COC is able to demonstrate the need for coordinated entry system that better meets the needs of survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and how the project will fill this need. Next slide, please. We are now going to talk about expansion projects. Next slide, please. Expansion is a process by which a renewal project applicant submits a new project or DV bonus application to expand its current operations by adding units, beds, persons served, services provided to existing program participants, or HMIS and coordinated entry capacity. Expansion projects cannot replace other funding sources. Next slide, please. Expansion project applications may be submitted through bonus and/or reallocation or DV bonus funding and are subject to the eligible activities we discussed. The bulleted list we are about to review are eligible projects through COC bonus funding. DV bonus eligible projects will differ slightly. Permanent supportive housing that is dedicated plus or has 100% of beds dedicated to persons experiencing chronic homelessness. Rapid rehousing projects serving persons who qualify as homeless under paragraphs 1, 2, or 4 of the interim rule. Joint transitional housing and rapid rehousing projects serving persons who qualify as homeless under paragraphs 1, 2, and 4 of the interim rule. HMIS and supportive services only and coordinated entry. Next slide, please. Project applicants requesting expansion funds must submit 2 project applications. First, the renewal project application to be expanded, and second, a new project application with just the expansion information. Next slide, please. Submission process and deadlines. Next slide, please. In terms of a process and timeline for submitting new project applications must be submitted both through your COC's local rank and review process and through eSNAPS. Check your local COC rank and review process to determine when new project applications are due to the rank and review committee. The rank and review process instructions, applications, and scoring tools for new projects are listed under your respective COCs on the CARES website. The rank and review process is the process in which COCs are required to score all renewal, new, and DV project applications. Projects are then ranked from highest to lowest score, resulting in the application's ranking. COCs will use the ranking and funding allotted for new and DV bonus projects to determine which applications will be included in the overall application. All new project applications are ranked and will be listed on a separate COC priority listing from renewal project applications. All new project applications must be submitted in eSnaps on or before October 6th by CARES. A draft will be sent to you for your review and comment that'll be due back to CARES by October 8th. Next slide, please. Some more submission process and timeline. On the rank and review section of the CARES website, you will find the written process and all the documents that were used for this year's application process. Within this section, you will also find the new and DV bonus applications and the submission due dates. Next slide, please. Important things to highlight. The community portion of the COC application has the ability to receive 10 extra points through submitting new project applications that collaborate with other housing funding sources and/or healthcare organizations. Specifically, 5 points will be provided to COC applications that submit at least one new project application that has an MOU with a healthcare organization to provide services to clients that will be housed through that project. Another 5 points will be provided to the COC applications that submit at least one new project application that utilizes funding sources other than COC or ESG to create additional beds and units in the project. Next slide, please. So what's next? If applying, please let CARES lead staff person for your community know what you will be applying for, such as what project type, target population, and estimated amount of funds to be requested. This will help us ensure that the rank and review process is as efficient as possible. You will then complete the new and/or DV bonus rank and review application. And finally, CARES will enter the new and/or DV projects into eSnaps on your agency's behalf on or before October 6th and send a PDF file for your review with edits due back to CARES by October 8th. Next slide, please. Webinar series. Because the NOFO details a variety of important topics, CARES has produced a series of webinars to cover specific topics in more detail. Additional webinars include presentations on the NOFO summary, new project opportunities, DV bonus opportunity, opportunities for renewing projects, consolidation and transition grants, eSnaps refreshers for renewal projects, and eSnaps refreshers for new projects. Please be sure to view these webinars on the NOFO section of the CARES website. Please also be sure to visit the NOFO page on the CARES website often for important application information and due dates. Next slide, please. I want to thank all of you for attending today's webinar. And this slide here shows the contacts for CARES, and you may reach out to any of the planning team with questions after today's presentation. We will now begin the Q&A. CARES staff will begin by restating questions and providing answers that were put into the chat during the presentation. Once those are complete, we will unmute everyone to see if there are any additional questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And thank you again, everybody, for being on today. We got a couple of questions in the chat. Feel free to continue placing questions in the chat, or after we finish going through those, you can also unmute and ask a question. So our first question was about by somebody who is a current recipient of DV bonus funding. So in terms of what you need to do if you were previously awarded DV bonus funds, you are now considered a COC renewal application. So that means that you will need to submit a COC renewal application on an annual basis in eSNAPS. That being said, because your communities are part of the UFA, CARES does that on your behalf. So what you'll see is CARES will provide you with a draft of what we have put into eSNAPS thus far and ask for your feedback before we end up submitting to HUD.
And then the other question that we got in the chat was if a new project application for expansion is not funded, does it put your original renewal project at risk of not being funded? And the short answer for this year is no. This year's competition actually puts all renewal projects into tier 1, and tier 1 is equal to 100% of the annual renewal demand for your COC. So essentially that means that renewal projects are safe for this year. So if you want to try for an expansion project and it's not funded, CARES may need to make some edits to your renewal project in eSNAPS to, take out the expansion request that would be added to that project, but no, your renewal project would not be at risk of losing funding.
The other part of that is that renewal projects and bonus projects are considered separately by HUD. So yeah, that's just another reason why your renewal project is not put in jeopardy if your expansion project is not awarded. Okay, so a clarification question. So you should be hearing from CARES in the next, I would say, week and a half in terms of your renewal application. If you are looking to expand upon a DV bonus initiative, that would be a two-step process. You would first submit a DV application through the rank and review process. And then if you're selected to move forward with the COC application based on your scoring, then we would utilize your rank and review application to draft an eSNAPS application that we would send to you for verification before submission. And the DV bonus applications for rank and review, those will be released and are due back based on what community you're in. And you can find all of that information on our website in the section that Sam displayed in the presentation. Are there other questions?
So a question in the chat, are renewal applications due to be submitted in eSNAPS by tomorrow? That's the date for folks who are not UFA. Everyone on this call is UFA. So that would be on CARES. We'll be reviewing and submitting those renewal applications on your behalf. And as Kelsey said, you'll get a sort of draft version of that to review before it's submitted as a final version to HUD. And that'll be happening in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, a recording of the presentation we'll be posting it to our website over the next couple of days and sending out a link to that. We also will be sending out by end of day a PDF of the slides from today's presentation, and at a later date pulling together an FAQ from the questions that we've received. We have a question: if a participant is housed in a hotel until space becomes available, can funding be used for that purpose? My initial reaction is no, but I would need to dig back into the COC regs just because I'm confusing them a little bit with the ESG CV regs in my head at the moment. So let me, Anquette, if you want to put your email in the chat, let me look into that one a little bit further, and then I can get back to you specifically. But typically permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing dollars are utilized to house folks in housing units. Are there other questions? And feel free at this point to unmute.
So Kelsey, just to clarify, so for all the UFA COCs, so everybody on this call, the new NDV applications are open. They are on the CARES website and they're all due back on the 20th. So if your agency is looking to apply for a new or a DV bonus, that's where you would find those applications, and they're due back to CARES on the 20th.
Albany's 22nd.
Oh,
Just
clarify, thank you.
So there's a question about human trafficking victims. That's another one I'm going to need to get back to you on. It's not called out specifically in the NOFO, while victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking are. But I'm going to dig into that one a little bit more and perhaps speak to some of our current DV providers.
Kelsey, this is Christine Rodriguez from Equinox. I just wanted to clarify something, and someone had asked the question before about if they currently have a program that is through DV bonus money that came from the last round, how that would be considered, what that would be considered now. If we had an original program that was expanded upon with the last DV bonus money, what would be the application process now? Would that DV bonus money need to go through this DV bonus money as well? Or is it considered a consolidated project and would be just a renewal?
The latter. It would be considered a consolidated project, and you would just be renewing that one project that has the accumulation of the funds from that expansion.
Okay, so then if we wanted to utilize this new bonus money, it would then be an extension possibly on that consolidated program.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great. Other questions? These are good ones.
Can I ask another question about permanent supported housing? The requirements to be considered would be that they need to be dedicated beds or have a documented disability. So for DV bonus permanent supported housing, what are the differences in the criteria there? Is-
So for DV bonus, permanent supportive housing actually isn't an eligible use. Rapid rehousing is, and the joint TH rapid rehousing project.
Okay,
So it would be rapid rehousing. So no disability requirements, no chronic homeless requirements, just serving victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just got a question, Kelsey, and I know Sam's on too. Maybe she can, because I know she sent me an email. But so the joint transitional and rapid. So if we want to just transition to rapid, but there's an option to do both, is that correct?
Yes. So the thinking behind the THRH program is if you have a lot of clients who need kind of a landing ground in a transitional housing space. So I think the thinking behind that is a site-based transitional housing type of project. But then, a HUD's goal in kind of moving away from transitional housing is to get people into housing units as quickly as possible. And so then that rapid rehousing piece would be utilized to support people in linking to housing units. So that would be an option to transition to, I believe, Ed. We would just confirm that with our HUD rep first. But I believe that would be an option.
Okay.
So Marcy, your question, so since you are with Rensselaer, which is, we are not a UFA for, that's actually great that you already started your renewal applications and eSNAPs, because CARES doesn't manage those. So that's good news.
Okay, so are those due tomorrow?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay,
That deadline, so that CARES has time to review and provide feedback. And then the agency has time to make any final edits before the HUD deadline, which is 30 days before submission.
okay, perfect. I was getting really confused. Also with that, are all my match commitment letters due tomorrow as well? Or can
No.
those be added at okay, they can be added at a later date?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Absolutely. If you have the information on what you're going to be using, that's all the better, but they can be added later.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Are there other questions about new projects? We had a lot of questions on our session this morning about expansion projects. So just to clarify, in prior years, if you were submitting an expansion project, so expanding upon an existing project, you had to submit that renewal project, a new project, and then a new project that had the cumulative combination of those two. This year, HUD has simplified that. And if you are submitting an expansion project, you only need to submit your renewal project application and the new project application. And each will only include the number of beds and units that you're applying for under each. So it won't be cumulative. On the back end, if HUD decides to award both projects, they will combine those projects in before sending you a contract. So another question, if we are going to expand our DV bonus project, we can apply for up to $50,000 in additional funds. Melissa, I'm not sure which community you are with.
Rockland.
What'd you say, Sam?
Rockland.
Oh, Rockland. So Sam, could you check to see how much in DV bonus there is for Rockland?
Rockland County has $211,390 on the table for DV.
Perfect. Okay. So the NOFO this year actually states that each housing project, so whether you're applying for the THRH or just the rapid rehousing straight, Each project needs to be for at least $50,000. In 2019, the minimum was $25,000, but so if you're going to apply for an expansion project for a housing project, it should be at least $50,000 and can be up to the maximum amount for that community, or however much you think would create a successful project. No problem. Other questions? For those of you who have not done a COC, applied for COC funds in the past, feel free to reach out. I mean, for anybody, feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to walk you through any element. But it is, a slightly unique process with it being two-folded. At first, as Sam mentioned, you need to apply through the rank and review process, which is our HUD mandated local process where the community determines, creates a tool to set priorities and then scores applications according to those priorities. And whoever is selected to move forward then also needs to be included, have an application included through HUD system eSnaps that then gets sent to HUD with the entirety of the COC application. Any final burning questions about new project applications or DV bonus?
Kelsey, do we find out who is assigned to our region through the website?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can say, Christine, for Albany, do you mean what do you mean?
For who our CARES contact is, because
Gotcha.
I know that
Okay.
there's been a lot of expansion and
Yeah.
people have moved around positions. So I didn't know if it was listed somewhere, like who was the point of contact for each region.
That's a great question. I don't think we have that listed on our website, actually, so that's a good tip as well. But Maureen is the contact for Albany. Sam is for Rockland, as well as Points North and Franklin, Essex. For the Rensselaer folks on, that would be Nick Casero or Haley Schmidhammer. But of course, you can contact any of us. You can always contact me or our general planning line or whatnot. We will make sure that your question gets to into the right hands and that somebody gets back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, it seems like that is it in terms of questions. So we will wrap it up here. And again, feel free to reach out. We're happy to walk you through anything related to rank and review, anything related to eSnaps, or just considering, what sort of project you're interested in applying for. So be in touch if you need. And thank you again so much for being part of this presentation.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.